get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to UAF, Elmer Rasmussen Library. Those of you who don't know me, I'm Bella Gerlich, Dean of Libraries, and I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We're here to listen and learn from UAF alumni author Mary Albanese as she talks with us about her recent memoir. Before we get started, I want to say a little something about Mary. Mary's born in upstate New York. She attended SUNY New York at Stony Brook on Long Island before coming to Alaska. She earned a master's degree in geoscience here at the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 1980 and spent 10 years here as a geological explorer. After leaving Fairbanks, she moved to the Pacific Northwest before coming back, where she worked as a writing instructor here at the university in the Southeast. Later, she went on to earn her PhD in writing education at the University of Reading in England. Mary has won numerous awards for her writing in a wide range of genres and has had one of her short films screened at the Cannes Film Festival. Oh, I think we'll have to get that in our collection, Mary.
It was a horror film. I don't know that it would fit.
It's totally appropriate. She continues to write on a diverse range of subjects, from fiction and nonfiction, and television and film projects. Mary lives with her husband, Tom, who is also a UAF alumnus in the English countryside. We are proud that both Mary and her husband are UAF alumni, and we are thankful for the many ways they add to our mission. Today, Mary will tell us about her time in Alaska and read from her memoir, Midnight Sun, Arctic Moon, Mapping the Wild Heart of Alaska. I'd like to welcome Mary and thank her for making a stop here on her tour as she goes around the West Coast talking about this book. Mary?
I will start with a short reading from the beginning of the book. I know the book just came out, so a lot of you won't have read it yet, but hopefully this will make you want to dive right in. My pack, heavy with rocks, dug into my back as I hiked across the uneven ground 20 miles from the Arctic Circle. There was no trail here, no roads, no buildings, and no people for miles. The rocks here had never been mapped. That was my job. I was a geologist on foot, and that's why I found myself in this northern wilderness with nothing but scrub brush, shivering pine, and the rocks. Always the rocks. I had been hiking for hours, checking every outcrop, measuring angles, and breaking off chunks of stone with my hammer. The sun was high in the summer sky. Instead of setting that night, the sun would blanket the land in a cool orange glow. At noon, though, the sun was bright and strong. I was hot. I had been slogging across the tundra for 6 hours, and my forehead was drenched with sweat. My skull felt like fire. I knew this was a warning. As one of the few women in a field dominated by men, I didn't tell anyone about my tendency pass out from heat stroke. I was dangerously close to having one now. You know, that always gets a laugh. I needed to cool down. I didn't have time to rest. I had too many miles to go to make my target. As a girl not long out of my teens, I didn't have the strength or the speed of the men on the crew, so I had to work harder to do the same job. I wasn't going to allow anything to stop me from covering as much ground as anyone else. I studied the contour map. If I veered to the right, I should run into a creek about half a mile ahead. I figured I could get there before I passed out. Another laugh. The creek was just where I thought it would be. It wasn't anything to brag about, just a trickle of water, but its edges were lined with a snow-frosted crust. Perfect. I took off my hat, a cotton baseball cap, and packed it with snow. When I put it back on, the crown of my head was encased in a bowl of ice. The relief was immediate. I could go for another hour at least. By the time the snow had melted and run down my shirt, the sun would be lower and cooler. Heat stroke averted, I set off again. Suddenly I heard something in the trees behind me crashing and thrashing. It sounded big, but when I looked back, I didn't see anything. It was probably a moose. I kept going. Then I heard it again. It was following me, and moose didn't behave that way. It was less than 100 feet away when it emerged from behind a tree, a black bear lumbering towards me. The bear's head looked small. This wasn't good. In the tundra, it's hard to judge size from a distance, but with a bear, the rule of thumb is small head means big body. This bear had a pinhead, telling me that its body had to be huge, a fully grown adult. I couldn't outrun it, couldn't outclimb it. I was no match at all. Without stopping, I pulled out my radio, a black state-of-the-art walkie-talkie the size of a quart bottle of milk and just as heavy. It was the best equipment there was, unable to transmit several miles in a straight line. Unfortunately, out here in the mountains and the gullies, not much was straight. "This is Mary," I spoke into the walkie-talkie. "Mike, are you there?" Chopper Mike, as we called our helicopter pilot, would be parked in these hills somewhere. Calm and steady, he listened to his radio for any signs of trouble. But with 5 of us out in the field, working as far as 10 miles apart, Mike could be 50 miles away. No reply. Chopper Mike was out of range. "Can anyone hear me?" I said, hoping to relay the message. Still no answer. "This is Mary," I said. "If anyone gets this, tell Mike I need a pickup, now." I shoved the radio back into my pack and went on, moving as fast as I dared, willing myself not to sweat. I had heard that bears can smell fear, and had spent enough time with the animals on the farm to believe this was most likely true. If I could convince this bear that I wasn't afraid, maybe it would wander off. No such luck. It kept coming closer every minute. This was a black bear, smaller than a grizzly, but capable of tearing a person apart. I could see this one was looking for trouble. I would have to face it. Not long before, another field geologist had come across a black bear like this. She was unarmed because her boss didn't believe in guns, so when the bear came at her, she had no defense. She decided to play dead, having heard that if you played dead, the bear might lose interest. This probably saved her life. Still, before he lost interest, the bear tossed her around like a rag doll, ripping her arms out of their sockets, one after the other. This wasn't going to happen to me. I pulled out the new blue steel .44 Magnum pistol I had gotten for my birthday. Not a gift I would have been given if I had stayed in New York State to teach science in a comfortable high school. I had abandoned that goal long ago, although it looked mighty attractive right now. How had I ended up here, staring down a stubby 4-inch gun barrel at an oncoming bear? My Magnum was the biggest pistol made. Still, it was just a handgun, reminding me of the endless debates I had heard in the bars back in Fairbanks. Would a pistol, any pistol, have sufficient firepower to drop a charging bear? As I steadied my aim, it looked as if I was about to find out. And you have to read the book to find out what happened. Although you can make a pretty good guess. I've got some slides from the book, and I'm going to try to do the trailer first if I can.
Okay, you want me to?
If you do that. The one good thing about making movies is that I've been able to make little movie clips for the book. Like you have a film trailer for a movie, these are book trailers. Yeah, this one.
This was me back in 1978. I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to do something big. I wanted to go to Alaska. I applied to every school in that sprawling state, but I didn't get one job. Apparently, New Yorkers had a reputation for making very bad Alaskans. But I knew Alaska was waiting for me, and I had the strangest feeling that if I didn't go there, my life would never feel complete. What, I wondered, besides teaching, did I do well enough to get me north? Then I had it. I understood about being a student. So instead of being a teacher, I became a student again and headed to the University of Alaska, where they had an advanced degree program for teachers. With my one-way ticket, I arrived in Fairbanks, the golden heart of Alaska. I saw cabbages as big as dishwashers, and the sun glowing at midnight like an egg yolk smattered across the horizon. And on a chance trip to the Arctic Brooks Range, I found fossils that had never been discovered there that proved the soaring mountains had once been under the sea. I was hooked. Forget about teaching, I was going to become an Arctic geologic explorer. After all, if at first you don't succeed, try something that's harder. So I became a geologist. I embraced the harsh life of an exploration field mapper and Alaska continued to surprise me at every turn, with sunsets on the blood-red tundra that looked like Martian landscapes. But not all of those surprises were good. In this land of raw and dangerous beauty, we paid a high price for life at the top of the world, beyond the edge of mankind. There were bears, rock cliffs that gave away, and even Wild West shootouts. Not all of us survived. Let me tell you about my Alaska, my mysterious friend that whispered its secrets as I climbed on its rocks and proud peaks. It's a story of life lived to extremes, surrounded by the people bold and outrageous enough to live there. Come with me to my world of Alaska, to the warm heart of the world's final frontier. Midnight Sun, Arctic Moon, a memoir by Mary Albanese, coming from Epicenter Press, spring 2012.
We'll see that picture again. Can we do the other trailer? That was the serious one. This one's the really serious one.
In the far north of Alaska, man and beast work together to tame the elements.
So that's, I'm hoping that one will go viral. If you want to help it, go to midnightsunarcticmoon.com and pull up the second video and send it out to all your friends.
You mean you want it to go rabid?
Rabid, yes. Am I doing this right?
Yeah. Hold the slideshow now?
Let's see. So now I'm going to go through the pictures in the book and talk a little about the good ones.
Have to hit the
Okay.
arrow key over.
This was the original cover. This is the new cover. They went to this because they sent us out to booksellers and they said, we can't tell that it's Alaska. It could be backpacking in Europe. So they put a more Alaska sort of cover on it. This was 1975, about the time that I was thinking of coming to Alaska. You see those great 70s clothes? This was the kind of picture that hooked me on Alaska. And it turns out that I would eventually come up and meet this guy. And there he is. This is Tom Albanese. I think a bunch of you in this room would probably know who that is. This was 1977 on the UAF campus. And the funny thing is that if you go out now, you'll still see people sitting on the grass right there. More UAF campus pictures. That's Yvonne Grace. Change her name now, but that's Yvonne Grace. And who is this? So Sabra. This is Sabra.
Sabra.
Yep. Sabra Reed. This was one of my first dates with Tom Albanese. We went up Panorama Peak. It was nice and easy going up at first, and he said if you slip, it's okay, you just click in with your rock hammer and you'll slide and slow yourself down and it's no problem. So we climbed and climbed and climbed, and at, late in the day, he said, we need to go back down. I said, I thought we just slide down with the hammer. And he said, don't do that here. If you do that here, you'll die. So I decided right then and there that was the end of my ice climbing career. And I abandoned the sport, but I kept the guy. Still not happy on Panorama Peak. Yeah, that was, I think that's over 45 degrees. Yeah. The second summer I was here, I was in field camp, and we took a bus up to the Brooks Range, and the bus stopped in a gravel pit and let us out, and then we went out and mapped from there. And that was the lovely conditions. There is the field camp crew. It's hard to believe that these idiots here mapped huge chunks of the state. And it was, the great thing about Alaska was it was the kind of place that you could come up here as a young person in your early 20s and do something amazing and put your name on the map, and we did. Even in field camp, that we went to a place that hadn't been mapped, and our name is on the map.
What is that?
What is that?
Yeah, what name?
Mary Albanese, Yvonne Grace, all of our names, because we went out and did mapping. This was a spike camp. Way up above the tree line in the Brooks Range. Beautiful views. We went up to Prudhoe Bay, and from there, of course, every place is south. And every 20 minutes on the haul road, the bus would look like that, completely dusted over. Even your glasses would dust over. And I remember as we went up, the first 20 minutes, all of a sudden it started getting darker and darker and darker. And I thought, what's going on here? The sun isn't supposed to set tonight. And it was my glasses filling up with brown dust. Later in that summer, I went out to my field rocks, which was in the north flank of the Alaska Range. I'm standing on some basalt chunks that had been blown up out of an explosion pit. This is called a MAR, M-A-A-R, and this was in the north side of the Alaska Range in a place called Buzzard Creek. And this is the explosion. You can see what happened. The liquid magma came down from below, and when it hit the water table, it exploded. It usually leaves a nice little lake pond where the water table is. And you see this ejector rim around the edges. This is a mountain that we had to come from behind and climb down and over and drop in. Here I am in my field gear with my shotgun. I used that shotgun for 4 years until it broke. I literally wore it out, dragging it through the brush. I didn't think you could wear a shotgun out, but you can. This is my brother sitting on the food barrel. Except for that barrel of food he's on, we've carried everything else in, including that magnetometer. The packs were, on a typical day, they were between 40 to 60 pounds without the rocks. Packing in, it would be more, because you would have your gear and supplies for the 2 weeks. But we were lucky that we were able to drop off the food barrel, so at least we didn't have to bring that in too. I had a different field assistant that was supposed to be my assistant that summer, but in the Brooks Range, I had done a little trial run, and I brought in enough food for 2 of me, and I didn't realize that the guys ate more food. So, we ran out of food real early, and when we got back, the rumor was out that I had starved this poor guy, and it's true. So I couldn't get a field assistant after that, so I had to import my brother from New York. My brother lasted 2 weeks. The thing is, if you're not a geologist, it isn't really fun dragging rocks around. It gets tiring after a while. So my next assistant was Harriet Small, and she was a great assistant because she was a geologist and she'd had some camping and some hiking and some wilderness experience. And this is up on Sugarloaf Mountain. As we were heading up to Sugarloaf Mountain, we were about to cross this little creek, and Harriet said, let me tie you onto this rope first. And I had crossed this creek a couple of times earlier in the summer, and I said, it's just a little creek. It was maybe from me to you. And it didn't look that bad. And she said, just humor me. And she pulled out this clothesline. So I said, okay, you can tie me onto the clothesline. So I had my pack on, I went in, I got about 5 feet in, and the water just slammed me. It just knocked me down, dragged me down. It was at 32 degrees because there was ice along the edge. And it took all of my energy just to breathe. There was no swimming possible. I had been in life-saving, I had been a captain of a swim team. None of that does any good if you can't move. So she fished me out with a clothesline. This is one of our high camps. The one behind is Denali. When we first went out, it was clear, and we had to work pretty fast to get everything done because we were watching the snow line come down closer and closer and closer, and we just got finished and got out before the snow line came down to us. That winter, I moved off campus and I moved into the bog. There may be some people here who have lived in the bog or know people or been out there. And there was my cabin. It was probably a little bigger than my car, but not much. This was Tom's graduation in 1979. Tom, about a month before the graduation, he said, I've got an idea. My mother's coming up for the graduation. Why don't we save her a trip and get married? The most romantic proposal of all. The day after his graduation, I had my comprehensive exams. That's the 6-hour exam where they grill you on every aspect of geology: paleontology, glaciology, petrography, mineralogy. So we had his graduation, my comprehensive exam, and the wedding all on the same weekend, from Friday to Monday. And actually, I would recommend that because I didn't have time to worry about any of them. This was when UAF had the graduation on campus. There's Tom with his mom and his sister. Esther Dome, the wedding at the Ullerhaven. And I have just learned recently who the dog was. It was Merritt Helfrich's dog, if anybody know Merritt. And I've also learned that 3 months after we got married at our potluck wedding at the Ullerhaven, there was another important wedding that took place up there. This was the inside of the Ullerhaven. We got it. We got a good price on it because it had been shut down because of the arsenic. So we hauled our own water up. This is my friend Yvonne Grace and Tom's sister doing the car. We never did get all that frosting on. This is the wedding party. Tom's stepdad, his mom and sister, Carl Hahnemann, who had never worn a tie at this point. My father had to lend him a tie and show him how to put it on. And then my sister and my mom and dad. This was my cabin at that summer. No heat, no water, no electricity, no windows. Yeah, this one was special. That was that summer. This was Tom out in the Seward Peninsula. He was working for Anaconda out there. He's bagging a sample. This was winter claim staking. Carl Hahnemann used to get jobs for us as winter claim stakers, and we used to go out and stake the claims, and it's just what it sounds like. You stake the claims in the ground, and you go back into town and you record it, and whoever has paid you for this gets the mineral rights for a year. The bad thing is that in the snow, as the helicopter flew back into town, you could see just how uneven your lines were. This was before GPS, all you had was your compass. We ended up buying a house up on Chena Hills. It was a divorce house, and there were bullet holes inside the house. That was the inside after we got it all fixed up. Still up there, still looks the same. This is the view from up there. 120 miles to the Alaska range, 150 if you could see McKinley. One year I worked for the Bureau of Mines, and I ran a program mapping evaporite deposits. This was up in the Circle area, and we would fly in a float plane, land where we could, and then go out to the salt deposits, not necessarily table salt, but trona and potash, and drill with a hand auger to see how deep it was. The good thing about mapping evaporite deposits was that there was only 3 questions that mattered: how wide, how deep, and how pure. Nice, simple geology. As you can see from this picture, it wasn't very deep. It was just a surface crust. So unfortunately, these deposits were never economic. This is the old Nebezna mine. Tom ran an operation down there, reworking the old tailings to see if they could pull more gold out. And they couldn't. The old miners got it all. This is the car coming out of the Nebezna Mine Road. When I show this down in the lower 48, they're real impressed that this is the 1st of September. Up here, maybe not so impressive. This is Jeff Klein out in Hatcher Pass at one of the old mine heads. Jeff Klein worked for the State Geologic Survey, and that's where I went after the Bureau of Mines. He had broken his back twice in the line of duty. This was out in the Live and Good camp. Tom Smith came and joined the State Geologic Survey. He decided that we were going to do big scale mapping, and we did. We had a whole team of geologists and went out and did mapped big areas. That was a pretty exciting program. This is a typical weather for Live and Good. You could expect pretty much any time you were out in the field to be too cold, too hot, too wet, too dirty, sore somewhere, too tired, hungry, or a combination of the above. Getting into the helicopter to go out for the day. But when you got to the top of the mountains and this was your view, all that other stuff didn't matter so much. You could put up with a little bit of discomfort when you got to be there. And sometimes you could think that maybe no one had ever sat on that particular rock and looked at that particular view. And that was a pretty awesome thing. When people would come out from town in the helicopter, they would bring a supply of fresh cheese, fresh meat, produce, and some alcohol. Here we are drinking up all the alcohol in one evening. This was down in Farewell. This was the kind of pickup we usually would have at the end of the day. We had a really good helicopter pilot, Chopper Mike, and he could get into some pretty tight places. Sometimes he'd have to come in on the toes of the helicopter's skid, sometimes on one side, and when he did that, what you'd have to do is, as you were getting on the skid, you'd have to watch him, and he would watch you, and make the shifts in the controls to adjust for your movements. And any imbalancing could tip the helicopter, and the rotors would crash into the mountains and crash. So it was pretty tricky stuff. And we had this unspoken rule that you never said anything about how scary it was until the helicopter was back in the camp on the ground. And then everybody would start talking at once. Everybody, did you see that? Did you see that pickup? I can't believe he picked you up. That everybody all at once, but nothing in the air. This is what we did, measure the angles. This is not an iPad. This is a metal map case, and inside is a map, probably right in the rain paper. And the colors, we would just figure out what the rocks were and put that color on the map. Somebody asked me if they do this from the air now. You still have to be on the ground because you have to crack the rock open to see what it's like inside. You can never do this from the air because the eroding, the lichens on it, it all looks different until you crack it open. So the good thing is that they will always need geologists on the ground to check the rocks.
What's the importance of measuring the angle?
Well, you need to know, if you got a bed coming in like this, you need to know where it's going. If it's coming in like this, you can expect it down here unless it's folded back up. So it tells you where that rock layer is going. Sometimes you can think you might see it on the other side, so you would know that it may be folding like that, so you'd have to go on the other side and check. But you have to think three-dimensionally when you think about rocks, and figure out how to get that three-dimensional image put onto a two-dimensional paper. And when you put the angles on it, it kind of helps you do that. Oh, this was north of Anchorage. This is me and Yvonne Grace, and she liked that view so much that she moved there, and she still lives there. Sometimes we would get down from the claim staking jobs on skis, and I couldn't ski, so they brought me in a toboggan. Back in town, I had a couple of dogs, and this little tiny dog sled with no brakes, which was really good for going uphill and going on even ground, but not too good for going downhill because I had basically no control. But Shirley taught me how to mush, so I went mushing my dogs. And this is my big half wolf dog, Ruby. And she was a very good puller, and she had one other really good trait, really good quality that Ruby could do that no other dog I've ever had could do. She could guard my bunny slippers. Nobody got near my bunny slippers. I won some lottery land up in Circle. This was back when they still had the land lotteries. I think someone told me they still have them once in a while. This mud trail here is Red Fox Road. According to the state, that's Red Fox Road. And this is what happened if you went down Red Fox Road. My Jeep had never been stuck before, ever, until it met Red Fox Road. And here it is, halfway up the hubcaps. We had to get the big state snowplow to pull it out. This is setting up a camp in the Chewilnik Mountains. John Decker was running this crew. Setting up a camp was a dirty, muddy, nasty job. The only thing worse than setting up a camp was taking it down, because at the end everything was really filthy. But when you were out in the camp, this was the view. You couldn't buy that view. Somebody had asked me about the symphony orchestra, here it is. So, this is what, the kinds of things we got up to in the winter when we weren't mapping rocks. This was one of those charity auctions where somebody dared me to conduct the symphony orchestra, and I did. And glad it's done, because I wouldn't want to do that again. The first time, the first rehearsal was just awful. The violins want to run away with the whole thing, and the percussions really want to wait to come in for you, so you gotta, it was like running a dog sled team, because you got the ones that want to go fast and the ones that want to go slow, and you got to keep them all going at the same pace. This was the Alaska Miners Ball. We were dressed up like dance hall girls. This was it was a costume ball, and one of the guys in the office, probably somebody that half of you know here, thought he was being very complimentary when he said, "You ladies don't make such bad-looking whores." That's Shirley there, and
That's all right.
me, and Shirley and me, nobody else in this room. This is my 74-pound king salmon from Kenai River. 45 minutes to bring it in. We had just gone out and we just dropped our lines, and I got it right away, so I thought this was no big deal. It wasn't until we came in and the kids along the bank were running along the boat that I realized it was a big fish. Doing karate in your backyard, as you do. Fairbanks in the fall, you can't beat it. You just can't beat it. This was our daughter, Yvonne. She's Korean. We adopted her from Korea. People thought she was native. She sure was cute. This was after we left Alaska. I was here for 10 years, and then we had to leave, and this is the family now, growing up, getting a little bigger. This is on the Oregon coast. That's Tom and me. And we got the chance to move back to Alaska after 7 years in Oregon. And this is down in Juneau. And I wasn't sure if coming to Juneau would be anything like Fairbanks, because it was 1,000 miles away in a very different place. But it did feel like coming home. This was from this picture was taken for the mining conference in Juneau in 1995. The Alaska Miners Association had a calendar that year, and I was Miss April. And that's it.
Does anybody have any questions?
So after all that, what persuaded you to get out of geology?
Well, once we left Fairbanks, what I did, field mapping, didn't really exist anywhere else. Every other place down in Oregon had already been mapped, and they didn't need anybody to go in and do the ground, breaking the ground maps. So I couldn't get a geology job down there to save my life. So I switched to writing. And we figured that it was a real strain to be pulled away from Fairbanks. So we figured that I better get a job that I wasn't going to be tied to a place, so that I would be portable. Because Tom's job moved us around a bit, and I could just take my pens and paper and do it anywhere. Yes.
Mary, Tom travels so much these days. Do you get much of a chance to travel around the world with him?
He's really not much fun to travel with. He works for Rio Tinto. It's the second or third largest mining company in the world, and he's the CEO. So he's very busy. I go maybe twice a year with him. If there's a reason for me to be there, like, there's a good one coming up, it's a ship launching. And they need somebody to, take the axe and cut the rope. And I've even had axe training lessons to do this. Somebody else had a question?
How long did it take you to write the book?
It took me 3 months to write the first draft and 4 years to write the second, third, and fourth. Yeah?
So out of all the things you've written about, what is the fondest thing that you've written about in the book, or your fondest memory?
Oh, gosh. I think the fondest thing was knowing I didn't have to go map those rocks again. And I drove up from Anchorage, and I was driving up, and the mountains were covered in snow, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna recognize my mountains. And then there they were, and it was just one of these, I hear the music going, and I'm like, I don't have to go up there.
What other things have you written?
I had an adoption book that came out in 1980 something. I've got a bunch of manuscripts that I'm shopping around, fiction. I've got the horror film that went to Cannes Film Festival. I did a TV series that we tried to shop to the BBC last year. They looked at it, they didn't pick it up, but they looked at it, so we're getting closer. And when I go back, I've got another series for another guy I'm gonna start.
What is the adoption book about?
It is about Romanian adoption.
Oh.
I wrote that in around 1992, when, right after Ceausescu had been shot, and they discovered all those Romanian orphans. And there was a woman that lived in the state who decided to go over and adopt a Romanian child, and she did. And then people started asking her how she did it, so she formed her own little adoption agency, and I followed a group of these guys around and documented their stories. And that was 1992, and just this last year, 2 of the girls from that book, who were little tiny children then, have written to me as adults. So that was fun. One of them has become a nurse, and she goes back and volunteers in Romanian orphanages. That book is called To Romania with Love. I think you can probably dig it up on Amazon or something.
Anything else? Well, we have copies of Mary's book up here, which you can purchase, or if you have one of your own, Mary will be happy to sign it for us and stay for some punch and cookies. So thank you all for coming. Thank you, Mary.